everyone, it's Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. We talk about everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics, to practical day-to-day life. And today, I want to talk about a story that I found in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette regarding the level of confidence the public has toward higher education. According to a new Gallup poll, it's plummeting. Absolutely in the tank, falling like a rock. And then the big question becomes, why is it falling the way that it's falling? Who's to blame for this? And we're going to explore this in this episode of Mangino Talks. Let's break down some of the story here. Public confidence in higher education has plummeted over the last 8 years, according to that Gallup poll. Tuition costs on the rise, enrollments have been dwindling, and universities are becoming increasingly more politicized. Only 36% of Americans have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education, according to the June poll. And that number down from 57% of Americans in 2015 and 48% in 2018. The majority of 2023 respondents, 40%, said they had some confidence in higher education. 22% said they had very little confidence. And in 2015, just 9% of respondents had very little confidence. So the people who have confidence, those numbers are dropping. The people who are lacking confidence, those numbers are going up. Declines happened across the board. Doesn't make a difference. Republicans, numbers drop. Democrats, numbers drop. Those who have degrees, numbers drop. Those who don't have degrees, numbers drop. It just doesn't matter. Political groups, education level, age, sex. And what's interesting is a statement from Zach Hrynowski. He's a senior education research consultant at Gallup, and he says this: sometimes when we do these polls and we see declines in the overall numbers, it's generally due to changes in one subsection of the population. In this case, higher education is losing ground, not only with folks that you might think of as generally being a little bit less favorable to the institutions, but also among the bedrock of support, Democrats, those who have a degree already, young Americans. You'd think those individuals would be more inclined to be supporters of higher education, but they pulled back on their support as well. Let's look at some demographics here, okay? Republicans, they had the steepest drop in confidence among political groups. Only 19% reported a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in 2023, compared to 56% in 2015. Republicans clearly seeing what's happening at higher education becoming more and more liberally minded. And then as a result of that, the confidence level in those institutions obviously falling off. Now, what's interesting to note is Democrats reported a 9% drop in confidence from 15 to 23. That number in 15, 68%, 59% in 2023. Independents saw a 16% decline. So it doesn't make a difference. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, they've all seen a decline in one level or another. And then an assessment needs to be made at the higher education level. Why is that? Why is it? It doesn't make a difference. Politically speaking, people are not comfortable and aren't confident in our institutions. And this is across the entire country. Now, granted, we focus primarily on what's happening here in southwestern Pennsylvania and across the entire Commonwealth, but this is also an issue all over the country as well. How about this? Those with a bachelor's degree, their confidence fell 10%. Those with graduate degrees, they reported a drop of 17%. So you go to school longer, you get more of a degree, and you have less confidence in the institution. Why would that be? Around half of respondents with college degrees currently have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence. Now, the confidence level of those without a college degree dwindled all the way down to 25%. It was at a high of 54% back in 2015. You knock off 25%, you're down to a 29% confidence level in 2023. Mr. Hrynowski also cited what he believes are several factors that could contribute to the wavering confidence: rising tuition costs and free speech issues that are on campus. I think one of the things that he's missing here is the overselling of a higher degree, higher education to those who really aren't fit to be in colleges in the first place. And we'll get into that a little bit more coming up in a few minutes. But what's happened is that in large part, universities, colleges all over the country saw themselves as businesses. How do we gain ever increasing numbers of consumers? How do we get more and more people to buy our goods and services, if you will? And then as a result of that, they end up selling them to people who have no real use for them. They get a lot of debt and no practical application. And then on top of that, they oftentimes get degrees for professions that pay little or nothing, relatively speaking, to what you could get without a college degree. And there's no real benefit to going. Now, if you're going to go to school and after graduating, you're in the IT field, and the next thing you know, you're pulling down $75,000 a year to start, maybe $100,000 a year with one of the big tech firms, you are completely convinced that this education thing was well worth it. But if you go to school and you get a degree in, I don't know, so many other different things that are lower level, and then you wonder, okay, what am I supposed to do with this now? What kind of money can I really make? You know, I wanted to do this as a profession. I wanted to do this for a living. And I was told that I should go to college to get a degree in this. And then I come out of college and I find out, one, I didn't need a degree, that I would have been better off starting off at the lower levels of employment within those organizations, within that field, made money over the course of the 4 years instead of losing money over the course of the 4 years, had 4 years experience within that field, and would have been a whole lot further ahead. But colleges, universities are not going to be that honest with people. If they're willing to part with the dollars to come to the schools, then you want to take 4 years of basket weaving, have at it. It just means a whole lot more money for them, whole lot more money for them. Pennsylvania colleges and universities are some of the priciest in the nation. Between 2015 and 22, in-state tuition at Pitt climbed 14%, Penn State 16%. How about this? Want to go to school at Carnegie Mellon, get a science tech computer degree? That's been up 20%. Duquesne University, most known for their law school, 34% in just, 7 years' time. At state schools, tuition has increased by over 9%, and many of the state schools are currently battling steep enrollment declines, as are Pennsylvania's community colleges. And here's what's happening. The people at the most premier of schools, like a Carnegie Mellon, like a Duquesne, like a Pitt and Penn State, where having a degree from these schools is just so vitally important. And the academic rigor that you have to be able to show to get into these schools is then on par with what you're going to have to do while you're at the schools. But then you have so many other schools, lower level, easier to get into schools. Some of these schools across the Commonwealth and across the country, as long as you have a pulse and you're willing to go into debt, they'll let you go to their school. I know this. I know this from a family example. Young student, graduated high school, barely made it past high school, wasn't a good student while he was there, slacked off, and then he decided to go to a particular school. His friends were going to that school, so he thought, well, I should go to that school too. And he showed up and he had the pulse, and he was willing to take on the debt because you have to have no credit whatsoever. There's no credit reporting. There's no credit score. There's not a aspect to where parents have to be able to sign off for you and where they have good credit. You can have the worst of credit, no credit at all. But if you're willing to sign to a lifetime commitment of that debt, they'll go ahead and let you in that classroom. And he went in. Didn't last a semester. But he does have $10,000 in student loan debt. You think he has a good view of college? You think he does? Of higher education? Where they should have been telling him, no, you're not suited for this. You need to go find something else. We're not letting you in. So many of these schools have no problem with setting their kids up for failure, academically and financially. And then they're on the hook for these student loans that young people are complaining about, have all this student loan debt. One of the numbers I would love to be able to see, How many people who have student loan debt don't have a degree, and how much debt are they holding? Think about that one. You went to school for a year, 2 years, maybe even 3. Can you believe this? And then you have $20, $30, $40,000 in debt, and you have no degree to show for it. Nothing. What are you supposed to do at that point? Well, the option is, what you need to do is go and get into more debt so that then you can get maybe a degree in something that can earn you a few more dollars. So you have the enrollment issue at many state schools, and then it's also trickled down to even community colleges, where community colleges, these are the schools that so many people need to be going to first, especially if they don't have the academics and the independent learning mindset. If you're going to go to a higher education, you need to do it on training wheels, and community college is a great place to start. It's a whole lot less expensive. And I know of professors that teach at some of the highest institutions around the region, and they teach at community college. And the point they make is, I teach the same curriculum in both places. It isn't as though it's a watered down, not as good as. They take their profession seriously, and what you get at the prestigious school is what you get at the community college. Sounds to me as though people ought to consider the community college. But what's happening is that those that would be in the wheelhouse of community college and would get an associate's degree and then see themselves making more money as a result of that, the lower wages that are currently being paid, they're rising. It's difficult to find a job that pays you less than $14, $15 an hour, $25,000, $30,000 a year. Another one where if you just show up on a consistent basis, you're willing to work, you're willing to apply yourself, you can easily knock down a job that's going to pay you $28,000, $30,000 a year to start right out of high school. And so people are thinking, why go on to community college? I can just do this work thing and just start my life right now, immediately. Many people are choosing that route. In some respects, depending upon what you decide to get into, it could be pretty beneficial. If you like the restaurant industry and you're willing to get into it right out of high school, and then I know of people who have worked their way up from working in these, even fast food. You become a shift manager, then an assistant store manager, then a store manager, and next thing you know, you become a regional manager, and you just decide, this is going to be my career path, and along you go. More power to you. Back to the story from the Post-Gazette. Over the past year, schools such as Pitt and Penn State have been the site of tumultuous protests after controversial speakers. And to some extent, I guess maybe that's playing a role. But at higher education, you're supposed to be challenged. It's not supposed to be a reinforcement of what you've learned anywhere, whether it was at home, the buildings upon what you learned when you were in school, but greater challenges to your preconceived notions. I'm all about that, completely, even when they're teaching things that are contrary to what I would otherwise believe. Now, for those that are more inclined to then follow along with whatever it is that's being told, okay, fine, and they go down that path. And then there are others who say, no, I got to find better arguments for the position that I take. More power to you. You learn a whole lot more that way than you ever would learn living in an echo chamber, where you just go to the schools that teach exactly what it is that you otherwise would believe. So I'm not so convinced that the controversial speakers are really that big of a deal. There is also a survey that says that about a half of Penn State students and 36% of Pitt students would feel somewhat or very uncomfortable sharing their views on a controversial political topic during in-class discussion. And I can see that. And I can see the people being uncomfortable with that from both sides of the political aisle. Most people are not interested in having debates over things. Most people are not ready to get into that verbal altercation. And so oftentimes, even at the higher levels of academic study, it's not so much that this student says A and then lines up all the evidence to back A, and then this person says B, and then lines up all the evidence to back B. It's just, well, I think this and I think that. Nobody's really learning anything except for the exchanging of opinions. And people, for the most part, don't want to get into that. That's not their thing. I mean, I've learned that in talk radio over all of the years. You have far more people who are just listening to the discussion than ever decide to actually get involved in the discussion and call in. So I have heard numbers as low as 1% of all the listeners ever call into a radio show to go back and forth. They just listen, take it in. So I understand why people would feel uncomfortable about sharing their views on controversial political topics. And then there's also this aspect that there's the societal acceptance position. Right now it's called politically correct. And if you express a view that is outside of what is politically correct, culturally acceptable, even if the way that you bring up your position and the tone that you take is not to be inflammatory, not to be insensitive, not to be incendiary, because you express a view that is counter to somebody else's view or the accepted view, then you are then labeled. You're a hater. You're an ist of some kind. You pick your favorite ist, and all of a sudden they become that. And I can understand why people would say, I'm not bothering to speak up because I don't want labeled that way, because there really isn't a free exchange of ideas as much as many of these institutions of higher education would claim. Low confidence in higher education also signals a broader trend across the country. Trust in other American institutions like the military, the presidency, the medical system, it's all dwindling. It's all dwindling. And we know why the belief in the military is dwindling. I mean, that's been going down since the 70s with the Vietnam War. It's yet to recover because the American people don't believe in the honesty of the military and primarily the honesty of the politicians that are pushing their positions, their ideologies, and historically have not really cared all that much that young men die in the process. I mean, you think back to Vietnam and the tens of thousands of men and women that died in that war for nothing. It really was for nothing. And then you have the government lying to the American people about the cause and the ongoing process, how things were going, just lie after lie after lie. You know, the whole Pentagon Papers thing. So no big surprise that we have a dwindling level of trust in the military, in the presidency. And I'm not surprised that we have dwindling trust even in the medical system because we see so much of it as being a moneymaker. It's just a way of major corporations that are for profit to make more profits, and those that claim to be non-profit to just still pad the books and to make it so that those who run these mega operations obscene amounts of money as well. And is it really about promoting the health and welfare of the people, or is it about trying to figure out ways of making money? And this is not something new just with COVID. I remember when my daughter was first diagnosed with a heart defect. This is going all the way back to the winter of '93. And we went to the cardiologist. We went to her pediatrician, not cardiologist, pediatrician. And the pediatrician says, I detect a heart murmur. I think you need to go to Children's Hospital and have this looked at. And my immediate thought was, is she being recommended to go because she really has a health issue, or is he getting some aspect of a referral kickback? Justified? I'm just telling you, that's where my thinking was. And this goes all the way back, I said, to the 90s, early 90s. So I went and got a second opinion out of state. I went to Ohio to see a pediatrician and say, look at my doctor, at my daughter, tell me what you think. And that independent doctor in another state said, yes, your daughter needs to go and see a specialist. And so we took her. And I remember at the time, I didn't have comprehensive health insurance. My health insurance only kicked in if you were admitted into the hospital. So I went to the hospital and said, listen, I realize that you have to do tests, but I want you to do the least expensive test first. And if that test affirms that you need to do another test in order to confirm your diagnosis, then do that. And then as soon as you get that confirmation, you're done with the tests. I have no more money for tests. But then, and I bring that up because there's this idea to where you go to the doctor now and they just can't wait to give you tests. How much of it is about money that they're making off the tests, considering that they're oftentimes employed by the hospital that then runs the tests, that runs the laboratories, that runs the tests? And it's just about churning more and more dollars? Maybe. How much of it is it about doctors that are concerned that if I don't run exhaustive tests, even when they're not necessarily necessary, then I run risks of being sued? Maybe. I'm just saying that all of that sows seeds of doubt. And so it's not surprising to me that the medical system has its confidence that is dwindling. We've gotten to a point to where it's difficult to believe, because when people are given opportunities to demonstrate themselves, especially in these institutions, to demonstrate themselves to be honest, to have integrity, they continue to fail us. That's why. And the money is ultimately the goal for the for-profit hospitals, for the nonprofit hospitals, for systems of higher education. There are some that are for-profit. There are some that are not for-profit, right? But the bottom line is they're about generating more revenue all the time. I don't know anybody who's not about generating more revenue. And instead of just saying, listen, we're about to sell you a degree in something that is practically worthless, but it's what you can do and what will keep you here for the next 4, 5, and 6 years to get that 4-year degree. And this is what we're offering. And don't worry about the debt. We'll figure that out later. No pre-education on the young people about what they're getting themselves into. Nope. Well, just go ahead and sign right here and your tuition will be covered. We'll give you a couple of bucks to be able to have some spending money while you're going to school. And then once you're done, then you can worry about the payments later. And then they graduate and they realize, oh my goodness, I have all this debt. And how am I going to pay this off? And I'm paying it off at such a low rate. It's going to be decades before it's finally gone. We're doing it to ourselves. Institutions of higher learning, they're doing it to themselves when it comes to the public's lack of confidence. Mr. Hrynowski said it is difficult to parse out how much of higher education's waning confidence is specific to the institution itself and how much of it reflects an increasingly skeptical American public. And that's a fair point to make, as I just have been talking about. But you know what? We have a right to be skeptical because we can clearly see that they are not operating in our best interests. They're operating in their own best interests. And it is a buyer beware everywhere. And when you look at the massive amount of student loan debt that we are sitting on and what people were able to earn afterwards and the doubts about whether or not it was worth it, it's justified. It is absolutely justified. I want to thank you for listening to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. Be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. By the way, new episodes drop Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Pittsburgh time. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit ManginoTalks.com. If there's a topic that you would like me to talk about or a guest that you would like me to have on, please send me an email. It's Mangino@ManginoTalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks. And then once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. And thanks again for listening to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast.
Trying hard to reach you 'cause I don't